After making $250,000 shorting Ethereum and altcoins, I am once again short ETH for 1.5 mil. In this video, I'll go over my bear case and why I think ETH will continue its descent below $3,000. This is the agenda for the video, so let's get right into it. So I do want to give an update to my previous short positions. So 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that I'm short over $1 million worth of Ethereum, and a few days later, we had these, another wave of liquidations where ETH went down roughly 22% in the span of 2 days. On November 4th, I did decide to cover my short position. So if you zoom into the screenshot here, you can see my total P&L below my face. And, most of my P&L came from shorting Ethereum and then a bunch of alts. Ironically, I lost money shorting ZK Sync, which is kind of funny. So I did cover at 32.56. But then again, I was like, wait, why did I do that? I'm still bearish ETH. The thesis has not changed. So I just decided to re-enter my shorts at 33.87. So for 1.5 mil. So this is my current position. So this is what I have on right now. Of course, I'm a trader, right? So I might change my bias in the future. So if I decide to turn bullish or get liquidated or whatever, right? I'll come on this channel and say that I was wrong, whatever. But still, I'm very, very highly convicted that we're going to see lower prices. So let's talk about the reasons why. So the first reason is the 4-year cycle capitulators. I personally don't really believe in it. The 4-year cycle, right? I don't think it makes sense for Bitcoin. And whether or not you believe in it, it doesn't really matter, right? What matters is that a lot of people believe in this, and a lot of people are positioned for this move and have a lot of capital locked into crypto, believing in this magical Q4 pump. So if that move doesn't happen, I think that's going to create more sellers in the future. I introduced this concept of time decay or data decay. This is a thing in options where even if the underlying asset is flat, you're essentially betting on volatility. So as we get closer to the expiration price, the value of the option goes down. So if you replace the Y and X axis with, Y axis being the utility or the retail's marginal propensity to hold altcoins, and then the X axis is time. Maybe, betting on the Q4 pump on October 1st makes sense, right? Just holding overvalued altcoins, buy high, sell higher. But as we approach end of year, as we approach end of year and price isn't really moving, I think that's going to just create more sellers, and then lower prices will create even more sellers. This is what happens in crypto. It's a feature, not a bug. And even if you don't believe in cycles, right, you're just holding a spot, you're comfy, right? You're just going to go on vacation. I'm sure that some of you are like, oh no, right? As soon as price starts going down, it's like, oh my God, what if cycles are real? And then, because most assets in crypto don't have cash flow. It's mostly based off of narrative, hype, and flows. So when things go down, it's very, very reflexive. So when we think about prices in crypto, we have to think about the supply and demand dynamics. Because like I said, they don't really have cash flow, right? What cash flow does Ethereum have? Bitcoin have? Solana have? Nothing really, right? So we can kind of simplify and say price will go up if there are more inflows than outflows, and then vice versa. So I think it's important to think about what are the sources of inflows, and then what are the sources of outflows, and what does that look like? So inflows, so this is a gross simplification, but let's say token buybacks, Hyperliquid buying back their own token. That's a form of inflow into the token. ETF and DAT buying, right? So retail, buys random DAT companies, and then the DAT dumps on them to buy more Ethereum or Bitcoin, right? So that happens. And then, the third point is retail mania. So retail coming back to buy our altcoins or whatever, right? And then the source of outflows is token emissions. Most crypto assets are inflationary. So, that's a form of supply. Insider unlocks, teams are going to dump. Team and VCs will dump tokens, ETF and DATs, they can also sell, and then retail capitulation. So a gross simplification of inflows versus outflows. And I'm not going to teach you Econ 101, but I'm sure you've seen this chart, right? Supply curve, demand curve, and then whatever the equilibrium point is the fair market value for whatever asset that you're trading. So what happens if demand goes down, right? Then the demand curve shifts to the left. Less demand means lower prices. What happens if supply shifts to the right? So what if there's more supply of tokens in the market? Then, supply curve goes to the right, and then prices go down. I think what we're seeing now in the current regime, especially after October 10th, is the aggregate demand of crypto is down. And also the aggregate supply of crypto keeps going up. So on average, the average coin right? The average altcoin, the price has to come down. And I think that's going to weigh in on the valuation of Ethereum. So I think this is what's happening now, right? Supply curve is shifting to the right, and then the demand curve is shifting to the left. So even if there are, the same amount of people in crypto, right? The same amount of money in crypto, right? Even if the quantity of money / capital people are the same, the price is just going to come down. I think this is what we're experiencing right now. So let's talk about demand destruction, right? Why is the demand curve shifting to the left? Obviously, October 10th, we had $20-30 billion of liquidations. And, I mentioned in my previous video that I think people will look back on this moment and say, yeah, October 10th was the beginning of the bear market for Ethereum. Watch my video back 2 weeks ago. I said the same exact thing. A lot of people argued against me, right? It's like, retail getting liquidated is very bullish, right? We can wash out the weak hands and then up only price action, right? But if you think about it, retail and some funds, right? They are the marginal buyers of altcoins. So if they lose a lot of money, then who is going to be left holding these bags, right? Or buying these bags? And this is the MSTR premium. So I don't really think Saylor is like, I don't think they're going to sell Bitcoin, honestly. But if you just look at this, I mean, this doesn't look like a raging bull market, right? So on the right-hand side, you see what's happening now in 2025. And then I kind of boxed the left side here, right? So this is, I guess, like mid-2021 to mid-2022, which, was like a terrible time to be long crypto, right? We were basically at the tail end of crypto. And yeah, like it kind of feels like we're, in the same levels as early 2022, which was also like a terrible time to buy crypto, right? And like I said, I don't think Saylor's going to sell Bitcoin, but this kind of indicates that there's less speculative capital chasing hyper speculative assets like MicroStrategy. I'm not an expert in MSTR Ponzonomics, but I don't know, like how can you look at this and be omega bullish, right? Raging bull market alt season. I just don't see it. Same can be said for the Ethereum DATs. It's really hard to calculate the actual MNAV for things like Bitmine because they kind of obfuscate the numbers. They're not completely transparent, right? I think they publicize their numbers like once a week or so. But also like who's buying these things, I honestly have no idea. And on the topic of retail, so these are my channel numbers looking into the subscriber count. So this is my channel 2025. So in Q1 we had like euphoria season, right? So I gained some subscribers. Q2, Q3, just negative subscriber count, right? Every week I lose subscribers. And then maybe the past few months, I've been bear posting, right? So maybe people like that or something. But yeah, I mean, this doesn't look like retail mania. Maybe you can argue it's a skill issue, right? Maybe my channel just sucks. But I don't know. I work hard, right? Making these videos, it takes a long time. It kind of reminds me of, this was like mid 2022 to late 2023. I lost 3,000 subscribers. Like I said, maybe it's a skill issue. And like before you ask, I don't run ads on this channel, so that's why my estimated revenue is 0. So there's different forms of demand destruction in the I guess retail getting liquidated, some funds getting blown out. MSTR demand is very low. DATs are kind of dying, and retail really isn't back. So let's talk about the increase in supply of tokens. So yeah, DATs. I mean, I didn't really think any of these DATs are going to start selling, but they kind of started, right? ETHZilla sold some ETH, Sequence, like whatever this thing is, sold some Bitcoin. At the end of the day, right? Like these people that runs these companies, they don't really care about the asset, right? They're just more interested in paying themselves salaries and then giving themselves like stock options. It's very extractive. So it's great on the way up, because they telegraph their buys ahead of time. But on the way down, I mean, it's just terrible, right? It's just very, very extractive. Even, the Trump family, right? They're extracting, over $1 billion from the ecosystem by launching their own tokens and like dumping on people. And this is a more recent development. So I wrote this article a few days ago. I'll put it in the description if you're interested in it. But we're kind of seeing this increase or this new meta, right? Where I guess projects like Mega ETH and Monad, they're conducting ICOs or public sales. And I think this is a next evolution of token launches where I think public sales are the new airdrops. So for example, Monad, they're going to do a token sale next week on Coinbase for $200 million, right? For $2.5 billion valuation. And then everyone gets like, free tokens, or everyone gets the tokens after, the ICO concludes. And, people are kind of upset by this, right? It's like, oh my God, like, why do they need so much money? But the reality is, I do think this is a pretty decent opportunity, right? I think the pre-market for Monad is like trading at like $5 billion. Even if they launch at 3 billion FTV, right? You still get like a 20% ROI in like a week, which is still pretty good from a trade perspective. So I do think $200 million are going to pile into this. I feel like over $1 billion might, go into this. I have no idea. Anyways, yeah, they're going to try to raise a bunch of money. And, previously, right? I mean, I'm a farmer. So, I mean, yeah, look at that. The farming rig over there. So, I used to be really into airdrops, and I still farm a lot of airdrops. And, like that was like a way for teams to launch tokens, right? Like, hey, thanks for depositing money in our dead protocol. Here's free tokens, right? But then, if you're a protocol, like, why would you do that, right? Like, you're just giving away free money, and then people will dump it, and then, people are going to be angry at the team. So I think the new pitch that teams are going for is, like, we'll basically give you free money, right, in the form of like a low valuation ICO, but you kind of have to pay for it, right? So instead of giving away $10,000, maybe Monad team, right, they're going to give away like $5,000, but in exchange, people have to pay for the token, so it's like the same dopamine hit of an airdrop, right? Like some free money, but it's just wrapped in some paywall, some KYC, and dressed up as like a community first fair launch. And there's this form of the endowment effect, where people value things more if they pay for it, right? Or if they already own it. So I think that's kind of what they're going for. Maybe if people buy these things at like a 50% discount, maybe they're not going to sell, right? Maybe they'll value it more. I do think this is a net positive for the industry, instead of just high FTV tokens just like launching, no airdrop, and then, like VCs dumping on you, team members dumping on you. At least, they're kind of giving retail a way to participate in some capital appreciation. But if you really think about it from a macro perspective, if you really zoom out, who is the marginal buyer of these public sale ICOs? It's retail like you and me, but retail like you and me, we buy altcoins, right? The marginal buyers for the ICOs are either existing like altcoin holders, or, we hold money that would have previously went into altcoins. So if you think about it, if $200 million goes into this Monad ICO, that's $200 million that's not going to go into Ethereum or some random Alt L1 or some random farm token or some like whatever, right? So I do think this is a net positive, but I think it's going to mean that there's less and less liquidity to support existing and old altcoins with zero fundamental value, aka cash flow. So yeah, there's like, there's going to be a huge dispersion between the winners and the losers. It's going to be a K-shaped recovery. So yeah, there's a lot of demand destruction, a lot of supply expansion. So why are people bullish? I really don't see it. I don't really see, I ask people, who are the marginal buyers? They don't really give an answer, right? They just say, oh, Q4 is bullish. That's not really a thesis. That's just hopium. Who knows? Maybe they're right and I'm wrong, but that's kind of my view. So yeah, I mentioned this October 14th, but I think the path for altcoins look fairly grim. Supply is up only, demand is going down, people feel terrible. Why would I hold altcoins when they can go down 80% in a single day? I just feel like most alts are just going to be down only, no pump, down only, Cretaceous, Paleogene extinction event coming for a lot of altcoins. So, okay, Taiki, cool. You're bearish altcoins. We're all bearish altcoins, right? Except the altcoins that you own, right? Those altcoins are very good, but everyone else, right? Those coins, very, very bad. So why do I think that ETH is going to go below $3,000? So going back on my previous video, right, 2 weeks ago, I mentioned that, yes, there is no bid for alts, right? The emperor has no clothes, So it should accelerate their path to minus 80%. That is going to drag down Ethereum. I call this trickle down dumponomics. People say, oh, stablecoins is bullish Ethereum. Institutions are building on Ethereum, but are they really, right? Like Tempo is like the L1. It's not even like an L2, right? And stablecoins are on Ethereum, and then ETH went down to $1,400 7 months ago. So it's just a narrative. If you really think about the fundamentals of Ethereum, we need on-chain activity. We need stablecoin supply expansion for any of this to make sense. But if altcoins are going down only, then that means two things. First, there's less things to do on chain. I'm not even talking about meme coins, but if alts are going down, then why would you use the chain, right? Like buy these things. A second thing is, where does the yield come from stablecoins, right? I get that stablecoin expansion is good, right? You can earn 10% in stables or whatever, right? But the yield comes from people dumping altcoins. Like when I farm, right? I farm altcoins. So when they launch, I can dump it, right? I need to be able to dump altcoins on people in order for me to realize yield. So if there's no buyer of alts, then the stablecoin yield across the board just goes down. And then at some point, the rate of growth, the rate of expansion for stablecoins is going to start, topping. And you can't just wait for stablecoin supply to keep going down, or to start going down to sell your like Ethereum or something. By the time stablecoin supply starts going down, everything's down like 50%. So I think on-chain is a leading indicator for things like majors, especially things like Ethereum and Solana that relies on on-chain activity and like whatever narrative, like so stablecoins or whatever. So for that reason, I mentioned that the state of altcoins do not support a valuation of Ethereum at $500 billion, right? We had this huge liquidation event on October 10th, and then ETH was sitting at $500 billion. That made no sense to me. So from a flows perspective, from a valuation perspective, from a fundamental perspective, I was bearish. Now, right, Ethereum price is a little bit lower. It's like 420.69, right? $420 billion market cap. At the end of the day, no one really knows how to value Ethereum. Should it be cheap at 400, 500, 300, 200, 100? I don't know. We don't know. The thing is, there's a loss in momentum on crypto assets. The narrative has weakened, especially as stocks are pumping, gold is pumping, and like crypto's kind of languishing. Why is that? I don't know, right? But there's something there, and I just don't think that if I'm this bearish alts, if you're this bearish alts, how can you be bullish Ethereum? Maybe Bitcoin's different, but Ethereum, Solana, I have no idea. So, generally, right, this is a gross oversimplification, but there's two reasons to buy crypto, right? Most of you. One is momentum. So it's a bull market, guys. Hey, buy high, sell higher, right? There's going to be future exit liquidity alt season, right? That's one reason to buy crypto, which I think is very valid. Number two is value. So you either buy crypto when it's going up, right? Expecting a bull market, you're betting on momentum, or you buy when everyone says crypto is dead, right? And everything's down 60%. Right now, I think that momentum in crypto has stalled. Look at the MSTR premium. Look at the amount of retail in crypto. It's not that great. But are we in value territory when Ethereum is at $400 billion? Bitcoin's basically at 100K. I'm not sure. I would love to be a buyer of all these assets much lower. So what I see in the markets is no momentum. Valuation is pretty high. Why would I buy? So if you really think about it that way, I do think that price is going to continue to drift lower for most crypto assets. The good coins will fare better, right, than the overvalued infra. But that's kind of my belief here. 2 weeks ago, I kind of mentioned this fractal here that I expected to play out for Ethereum, and having it go down below 3K. So this is the diagram. I've shared this like so many times, but I do think it's playing out. So I do think it's worth considering like how cycles work in crypto. So phase one is the early bull, right? We have some accumulation, and then there's some consolidation, and then we pump into phase two, right? This is when people get euphoric, and then phase three is when there's distribution, and then like some altcoins pump, and then at some point we enter phase four, the wealth destruction / down shop, and I think this is where we are at. So if you kind of zoom in here, large liquidations signal the transition, October 10th, and then November 4th or 5th, right? We had those liquidations. Bodies being in the surface leading to more bodies. So we've had some DeFi protocols with holes in them. Some funds are blown out. I know some traders that got blown out. If they're gone, then who's left to buy like alts, right? Levels after levels are violated. Longs are punished. All positive news gets instantly reversed. Think about all the good news that's come out, right? Ooh, Trump is chickening out, right? The tariffs, right? He's backing out. We pumped like 4%, and then we just full retrace. Oh, the government shutdown is ending. We pump, we full retrace. Every good news gets fully retraced. That is not a bull market. If it looks like a bear market, if it feels like a bear market, it's probably a bear market. So it's at least worth considering. Taking some chips off the table, right? I don't think you have to go like full on short like me, but if you're like max long crypto for, like for whatever reason, why not raise some cash, right? That's kind of the argument that I've been making. So yeah, wealth creation, distribution, I think we're here. Hopefully closer to the end than the beginning. And then at some point, I think we will bottom out. I have no idea at what price these things will bottom out at. I just think that the valuations are way too high. I think, the bull case for ETH and alts lacks legs. This is my observation and my opinion, but I think, the main argument for the bulls is we need to pump in Q4, right? The stocks are pumping. We have to pump. People are too bearish. That's not, that could be a factor, but I don't really think that's like a reason right, for price to go up, right? I feel like it's more important to think about the demand, supply, like fundamental drivers that actually affect price. And maybe I'm mid-curve and I'm just like, over analyzing things, but I feel like I don't know. I see it fairly clearly, like there really is no reason to be bullish right now. If anything, right, just de-risk, chill, and yeah, just relax, right? I mean, how many people, I mean, imagine like 2 years ago, right? If I told you that the MSTR premium is going to be near 1, I'm sure most of you would be like, yeah, like I'm out, like sailors tapped out. But now that we're here, right, because people haven't made enough money, they're just like, oh, we have to pump. I feel like that's not really like a bull case. And I tweeted this a couple of days ago. So I think capital preservation, and that's ultimately like the goal of this video, right? I'm not trying to convince you to just like sell everything and it's all over. But it's like, yeah, capital preservation is just as important as making money. Because if you lose 20%, or if you draw down 20% in your portfolio, you need a 25% pump to get back to even. So in a way, if you can avoid a 20% drawdown, that's just as good as capturing a 25% pump on Ethereum or alts or like whatever, right? Sometimes the real alt season is waiting to buy lower. Sometimes the real alt season is waiting to buy lower. That's my view. I'm not like a perma bear, right? If anything, I'm always bullish crypto, but I just look at the valuations and the state of the markets, and I just can't shake the feeling that lower prices are inevitable. And in fact, I am bullish. I'm just bullish on my ability to buy these assets at lower prices so that I can make more money on the other side whenever we do re-enter a bull market. So, like when is that going to be, right? Like, is it all over? What's next? I do want to end this video with a more hopeful message, right? Because I don't want to just be like super bearish and say, like it's all over, because I am a bull at heart, and I don't want us to go down, right? But we have to trade the markets that we have, not the markets that we want, I just want to share these warning signs because I just observe like other YouTubers, other influencers, and I mean, I fell into this trap as well last cycle. If you look at my videos early 2022, I was like in this wag me energy where it's like, oh, don't worry guys, like, everything looks bearish, but don't worry, like we're gonna win, we're gonna make it, and then I just ended up drawing down like 50% in my portfolio, and it was like very, very tough. So I think this time I'm trying to learn from my mistakes in the past, and if this is your first cycle or even your second cycle, I do think it's worth taking these factors into account. And I think what you should do is not just listen to me, but just use me as like a data point, right? Taiki has all these bearish reasons, and I'm sure there's like 10 other YouTubers that are like bullish for whatever reason, right? So like, just weigh these factors and then figure out what you should do with your portfolio. Because at the end of the day, I can't control what you do, right? You click your own buttons, you take your own responsibilities with your own money and your own decision making. I'm just trying to give a counter argument to like the wag me bull side, because I do think that avoiding drawdowns is very, very important in crypto. And I do think this is like what's happening in crypto, right? So there's like this meme, right? Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and then weak men create hard times. I think the past year, right? I mean, maybe it hasn't even been like that good of a time, right? But I do think that we are in this phase of hard times creating strong men, and I don't even mean men in in the form of crypto bros, right? Hard times create more battle tested protocols. We wash out the scams, the grifts, the excesses, right? Like I honestly hope that the Trump family just like capitulate out crypto, right? Like we don't need them, right? They're just grifters. And at some point, once we wash out the bad actors, I think we can return to good times. But then, once we return to good times, that'll create weak men and then attract like more opportunistic people. So I think that's kind of where we're at. And I think the analogy that I really like the past few months with the October 10th liquidations and then November liquidations is like this metaphor with wildlife and like after a forest fire. So let me just read this. After a forest fire, wildlife face immediate danger from the fire itself, leading to casualties from flames and smoke. In the aftermath, animals suffer from habitat loss, causing them to leave their home in search of food and shelter. This often results in increased competition for resources, stress, and potential conflict with other animals or humans as they enter other territories. However, fires also trigger a new cycle of growth, with some species benefiting from the changing landscape as new vegetation provides food and the open areas favor different species. So, winding this back and relating to crypto, I think, wildlife is kind of like the liquidation events, right? A lot of people lost a lot of money, and then people are feeling really, really bad, right? There's like this form of habitat loss. It's like, oh my God, like I might lose my job. I lost like half my portfolio. What do I do? And as a result, there's less confidence in the markets, meaning that it's going to be increasingly PvP. So every pump gets fully retraced. There's going to be more scams, more rugs, more exploits, more, pump and dumps. I have no idea, right? More stress. And if you log into crypto Twitter, right, it's very toxic. Just read the comment section of my past 3 or 4 videos, right? Everyone is very, very toxic. Everyone hates me. I get it, right? No one wants to hear that prices might go down. And I don't want to be that guy to say prices are going to go down. But hey, I think people need to hear it. However, right, after such traumatic events, whatever survives, and once we make it to the other side, we're going to see thriving industries, right? Some sectors recover, some good coins start pumping. And I think that's what we need. I think this is where we're at, right? I think we just had a wildfire or forest fire. And, we're kind of on the precipice of a new cycle of growth, which is going to take some time. We're not going to V-shape recover, in my opinion. So this is a time to hunker down, not capitulate. Don't fall into this trap of time-based capitulation, right? I think that's what's going to end up happening, honestly. But I think this is like the time to pay attention. I think there are some assets worth buying at this point, even though I still think ETH will go down. So I'll talk about that. So yeah, only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. And I think this process takes some time. Like I said, I think it's good to see like scams and vapor go to zero, right? And I think it's our responsibility to short some of these things. I'm not going to recommend shorting, but so that if I short scams, I make money, I can reallocate capital to things that may actually produce value. This is an excerpt from like a Twitter account called Anteater, but he believes that trading at its heart is basically the art of allocating capital to where the world needs it. If you think that the world needs more of something, you long it. If you think it needs less of it, you short it. If you're right, the world allocates more capital to you so that you can go out to help the world allocate even more capital. Like I made money shorting. I mean, hopefully, selfishly, I hope I make money shorting. But on the other side, right, with hopefully more cash, if we do see a bigger dip, right, I will just buy good coins, right? And I will just ignore the bad coins. I will reallocate capital from garbage to quality, right? That's my responsibility. That's everyone's responsibility. And also, if you do it properly, you can make money out of it. A good example is, a couple days ago, right, Hayden Adams of Uniswap announced like a Uniswap fee switch and then burning 10% of their total supply. And this is very, very close to my heart because literally a year ago, I was like aping Uniswap because of the fee switch, basically at the same price, So I understand how valuable this is. People have been positioning for this or trying to position for it for the longest time, and it's actually finally happening. Though like the current market environment is pretty tough, it might not lead to immediate pumps moving forward, but I do think this signals the transition from worthless governance tokens to tokens actually trying to be pseudo equity. I think it's a good thing, right? We're in this recovering process where maybe the altcoin bear market, right, can transition to like a bull market, but only for the good coins. So people like this post because it's way more optimistic, right? But I think for crypto, we're gonna see a K-shaped recovery moving forward. I honestly have no idea, right, where we are on the downtrend. My inclination is we haven't bottomed yet, but once we do bottom, maybe we've already bottomed. But once we bottom, I think the coins that will recover are maybe assets with monetary premium, like Bitcoin, and then coins with buybacks. Not all of them, but like the good ones, right, with moats and good teams and whatnot. But the debt sectors, overvalued infra, unlocks, emissions, garbage, they're going to go to zero, right? They're never going to recover. 98% of coins out right now is already dead, right? They're like zombie projects. The teams are just collecting salaries, dumping tokens, and they're going to pivot to a new thing, right? Once the treasury runs out. So like those coins, you just don't touch them, right? Maybe you can like play bounces or whatever, right? But I expect this moving forward. And our job is to find good coins and then reallocate capital to the good ones and then just ignore the bad ones, right? Do not give attention to the bad ones. They deserve to go to zero. The teams and the insiders deserve to make less money or no money, in fact. So that's gonna be it for me. So I am short Ethereum just because I do think it's gonna go lower, but I do think that, moving forward, we're gonna see crypto grow as an industry. I think that's a good thing. I think the times are over, right? Last cycle, people were like, oh, FDV doesn't matter. Oh, cash flow doesn't matter. But I think crypto is maturing to be like pseudo stocks, right? So if your project makes money and it goes into the token, then price will go up, right? If we are in like favorable market conditions. That's a good thing, I think, we're maturing as an industry. Unfortunately, right, the meme coin super cycle might not be playing out and random narratives might not play out. But, whoever's around right now, right, whoever still has money allocating to crypto, the ability to allocate money to crypto, there's smart people, right? Whoever's alive right now tend to be more sophisticated, I think. So I don't think it's going to be an easy market, right? It's going to be very PvP. And I just want people to, let's see. What was that? There you go. Avoiding a drawdown or avoiding a 20% drawdown is just as important as, or like just as good, right? As like a 25% pump, if you really think about it that way. So, I just want everyone to reconsider the risks that they own in their portfolio. Really think critically about who's the marginal buyer, who's the marginal seller. Why will this go higher? Why will this go lower? And then only then, right? I think you can allocate capital to crypto well. That being said, I'm not even like that good of a trader, right? People make fun of me being mid-curve, so I could just be full of shit and I could just be wrong. But hey, you're watching this video. I'll offer my insights. So thank you for watching. If you like the content, please check out my premium Discord. Link will be in the description below. If not, that's fine. I hope everyone does well, right? Hopefully I am wrong and we see higher prices because, honestly, it's a lot more fun if it's in a bull market, and it's a lot easier to make money in a bull market. So I don't want it to be over, but here's an argument for why it could be over. Thank you guys. Have fun navigating the markets. Bye-bye.